everyone, it's Desiree, and I am here with a Let It Go Wednesday episode for our Facebook group of Always Be Creative. So let's focus on this episode for using dies, what we can do with the dies, whether we embellish them or anything like that. So what I'm going to focus on is a Spellbinders die that I have, and it's one of their D-Lites. Now, I always keep that little bin off to the right-hand side of me, and it's filled with my scraps. As I gather them and everything else, I just throw them in that bucket. So I just dug through, and now when that gets filled, I clean it out. That's where all my scraps go now. I used to keep them in a file folder, and then they would be hidden, and I would never see them again, and everything else. It was horrible. But with that being off to the side, I now dig into that more. I use it for my sentiments. I use it for small die cuts that I'm adding, and it really works for me. I'm also going to be using one of my Simon Says Tiny Words sentiment packs, and this was during their Stamptember, so I just had to have it. I'm finding I'm liking these more and more. And this die set from Spellbinders was in my stash, and it's called Love Letter. And I thought it was fitting just before Valentine's Day. But again, just to use up those scraps, I'm using what I have, digging in there and just pulling it all out. So these videos, I'm always going to try to give you some tips and tricks like I always do. But to show that with what we have in our stash, we can use it. You don't have to have these dies. You don't have to have that sentiment pack. You can do with what you have in your stash and create something that's similar. How did this inspire you? It could be the colors that I used. It could be the dies that I used. You could come up with another way to make an envelope or a note or anything like that. So that's what this is all about. All right. So now I'm just lining up my dies to the cardstock. This comes with all these great heart sizes. And I just went to town and did all of my die cutting. Now, one of the things that I do, many things that I love about Spellbinders dies, is that they emboss at the same time. They dry emboss. So like this little love note has this embossed section of like writing on the note. So, and a lot of their dies have that, which I think is just great. You don't have to pull out an embossing folder, but you can. You don't have to write. You could write your note on there if it didn't have the embossing. So there's just many avenues that you can take with these. And I just thought it's one of their smaller die sets, and everything I used, of course, will be linked down below. I also used one of my favorite frame dies. That's by Penny Black, and it's called the Antique Frame. It's my second to favorite. And I'm going, nope, it's not Vintage Photo. Yes. I'm using the Spun Sugar Distress ink and one of my finger daubers, and I'm just going around the edges of this. So it doesn't have to be Vintage Photo. It can be any ink that you have. You can use any type of sponge, but I just want to give it some color on the edges. And since it's Valentine's Day, I did want to use, you know, whether it's a gray, I like grays and pinks and reds and blacks and teals when it comes to Valentine's Day. Again, I've said this in a previous video, sometimes my Valentine's gets a little edgy. That's what we'll call it. We'll call it edgy. So this kind of stayed right in line with Valentine's. But of course, the Vintage Photo did have to make an appearance. And I'm going to go through around the envelope, the note, and the hearts. And what's great with this die is you don't have to fold it up, but you can, so you can create your own if you don't have this set. But it also has the cutout in the bottom too, so my note will be able to fit in there. So I thought that was absolutely great. And you can score. It gives you that score line so that you can fold down the top if you want the envelope to be closed. So very versatile in such something that's so tiny, which I think is awesome. So I also grabbed some glitter cardstock there just to give it a little bit of bling. Used my anti-static tool. Now I tend to be a little abusive with that to make sure that it works so it doesn't clog up. And it's been good so far. I think because it doesn't want to be abused anymore. But it can clog up. You can unscrew that top and put a pin through it just to get that powder in there moving again. So I'm grabbing my Versamark ink and I've chosen the sentiment "Sending Love." And I'm going to stamp that down on the bottom right hand corner of my envelope. I'm pretty amazed. I almost got it straight. So I was pretty proud of myself there. Yes. And then I'm going to use my Simon Says Fine Detail White because these are very tiny sentiments, but they're perfect. I think they're even perfect. I'm one that, with all the work that we do on the front sometimes, you know, somebody had asked in the group, do you have to have a sentiment that sits on front of your card? No. I'm going to sing that like I do with Let It Go. Absolutely not. I do feel that we put a lot of work on the outside sometimes, and sometimes our sentiments are just too big and I don't want to cover up all of that work that I've just done. So no, you don't have to put that sentiment on the front. But with these tiny words, sentiments, and there's I think 3 packs out now, you can still put a sentiment on the front and make it very tiny so it doesn't cover up all of that work that you've done. So I hope that made sense. But I did see that question and a lot of you did come back with, no, absolutely not. And you don't. These are your cards. These are your creations. These are things that you're putting together. So however you want it to go with it and have fun. So now I'm just having fun placing my hearts all around. I'm using my wax pencil to pick up the smaller ones because I got these chubby fingers there and sometimes I bend the cardstock when I go to pick it up sometimes. So with the wax pencil, I can still use it with my cardstock so that I can place everything around. Once I know the general placement of where my hearts are going to go, I want to put my envelope in place too, because I want that down on the corner. So I want these hearts to look like they're coming out of the envelope. I'm going to use my double-sided foam squares for my large hearts, and I'm just going to place that in the back. I want to have some dimension on this card because I do love dimension. I love popping things off or adding the layers to make the card a little bit thicker and more interesting. But you can see, just cutting out the cardstock, adding a little bit of ink, whatever that ink is, to the one side to give some shading. You don't have to do fancy backgrounds or anything like that either. Sometimes we get lost in all of these wonderful techniques when it comes to our cards, and sometimes I find myself, I'm like, oh, well, I want to do this background and I want to do this, and it's just so much. Cardstock, glue, dies. Beautiful card. So the smaller hearts, I'm going to use my liquid adhesive, and I'm using my art glitter glue, and I'm going to adhere them directly down. Now I want to look at the position, I'm just going to make sure that one heart's down there, of where that envelope's going to go. And I'm going to grab my infamous, I love my Faber-Castell Pitt pen, and I'm going to place an X. Now that'll be covered. But the reason why I wanted to place the X, I wanted to know somewhat what the center of the envelope was, because I love to doodle. Sometimes I think it is one of the best things that we can do with our cards. So I'm going to turn my hearts into balloons. I love balloons. I have, I look back on my video, I put a lot of balloons going on there, but I love doodling too. So I'm just going to add these lines. Some of them are going to have curly cues. Some of them are going to be straight. All of them will have my squiggles. I like to do my squiggles. And just pull all of this down from this envelope. So again, the sentiment for me sometimes really helps and shows me which way that card's going to go. Sometimes, about 99% of the time. So sending love. So I'm making this envelope with this note look like it's being carried up by all of the heart balloons, and it's coming your way. So I do find my inspiration is just with the sentiment. Just for some reason, it's like a pun for me so much. I want the sentiment to explain, or the picture to show what that sentiment is trying to say there. I did use, sorry, I rambled there a little bit. I did use my double-sided foam squares as well to pop up my envelope. And now I'm looking at the background. Light blue wasn't working for me, so we put that away. The pink was kind of the way, but I didn't want to lose all of the inking that I did around the side. So we went with a gray. Just because I don't have gray in my card doesn't mean that that can't be my backdrop, because the gray is pulled in with the black as well. So I'm going to use my standard A2 size card base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and it is a top folding. I used my glue to set down my panel. I didn't want to raise that up with all of the foam squares that I use. I don't like to make them too thick so that they can't get in there. And of course, my huge staple, my iridescent sequins by Desiree. I buy all the different sizes. I put them in a big pot, mix them up, and then I just put them in one of my carriers. I have glue dots all over, and I'm going to set my sequins all throughout my card just to give it a little bit more shimmer with the glitter hearts that I have there. But I do love these iridescents. To me, they have all the colors that we use. They change colors depending upon what cardstock you put them on, and I think they are very versatile. I always gravitate to these than to, you know, the different color sequins. It's really funny. So that's our project today for Let It Go Wednesday. I hope I've inspired you. I cannot wait to see how you were inspired by this piece, what you used, what you looked at. So when you do those posts, let me know that. What inspired you? What made you create the card that you created off of what I created? I love to hear. It could be something as small as the sentiment, but just to see and hear what inspired you to have your creation. Maybe you do have this die, maybe you don't, but if you do, what was your spin on it? What did you look at? What are your likes and dislikes when it comes to this project? If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. If you're curious about this group that I'm talking about, the information's down below as well. I hope you'll join us. We're having a great time over there. No judging. It's a free zone to have fun. Show off what you make. It is wonderful, and you are all inspiring me. There's a couple projects where I'm like, I'm kind of liking that. All the products I used will be listed down below as well. So I thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe and tune in for my next video. Here's a couple other videos that I thought you might like going along with this theme. And also, remember, take care everyone, and always remember, be creative.